Ava Solis stood alone in her kitchen as the clock on the wall clicked past midnight, the sound loud in the quiet house like a heartbeat reminding her that time was moving whether she rested or not. The light above the stove cast a warm yellow glow over the counter where bowls, spices, and fresh ingredients waited for her hands. She tied her apron tighter around her waist and whispered to herself, "This day only comes once, and I will make it beautiful." Her son, Leo, was turning 25, and she imagined him laughing with his friends, proudly pointing at the dishes and saying, "My mother made all of this." That thought alone pushed her forward as she began washing rice, her fingers moving slowly through the cool water. In the living room, her husband, Daniel, stirred on the couch and called out sleepily, "Ava, it's too late. You should rest." She smiled to herself, though he couldn't see her, and replied, "I will, just after I get the biryani started." The house fell silent again, except for the gentle sizzle of oil in the pan and the soft hum of the refrigerator. Outside, the night air pressed against the windows, but inside, the kitchen felt alive, full of quiet determination, love, and a hope that tomorrow would be filled with gratitude rather than silence. As the night deepened, the kitchen became a world of its own, filled with steam, aromas, and Ava's steady movements. She rolled dough for fresh flatbread, her hands dusted white with flour, while a pot of spiced chicken simmered nearby. "You're going to be tired tomorrow," Daniel said again, this time standing in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. Ava glanced at him and laughed softly. "I've been tired for 25 years, she replied. "What's one more night?" He shook his head, half smiling, half worried, and went back to bed. Ava began preparing the desserts, carefully layering syrup-soaked pastries and stirring custard until it was smooth and golden. She remembered her own mother working through nights like this, always saying, "Food is how we tell our family we love them." That memory made her pause, her eyes growing warm, but she blinked it away and kept going. Somewhere down the hall, Leo's door creaked open and he called out, "Mom, are you still cooking?" She answered cheerfully, "Go back to sleep. Tomorrow is your day." His footsteps faded and the quiet returned, wrapping around her like a blanket. She whispered to the empty room, "I hope you see this, Leo. I hope you really see it." Morning arrived in soft light through the windows, and the house slowly filled with voices, footsteps, and the sound of doors opening and closing. Trays of food lined the kitchen counters, covered with clean cloths, each one a small promise of celebration. Ava stood back and admired her work, her back aching but her heart full. Leo walked in, scrolling on his phone, barely glancing up. "Smells good," he said casually. Ava brightened. "Your friends will be here soon. I made all your favorites." Leo smirked and joked loudly, "If they don't like it, we'll just feed it to the dogs." The words landed heavier than he intended, and a few cousins nearby laughed. Ava's smile froze for a moment, though she quickly forced it back. "Oh, Leo," she said softly, "you're funny." But inside, something cracked. Daniel noticed and cleared his throat, changing the subject. "Let's set up the tables." The room buzzed with movement again, but Ava felt strangely alone in the middle of it. She touched one of the trays gently, as if to remind herself that the food was real, that her effort meant something, even if the words in the air made it feel small and invisible. Later, while everyone was busy decorating the backyard with lights and balloons, Ava quietly lifted the trays and carried them to her car. Her heart pounded as if she were doing something wrong, even though she knew she wasn't. She drove to a nearby community shelter, where people lined up for a warm meal and a kind word. When she opened her trunk, the shelter worker's eyes widened. "Did you make all of this?" he asked. Ava nodded, her voice catching. "Yes. It's for my son's birthday, but I thought it might be better here." The worker smiled gently. "They will be grateful. I promise you that." As the food was carried inside, people thanked her, some shaking her hand, others simply smiling. One elderly woman said, "You have a good heart, dear." Ava felt a warmth spread through her chest that she hadn't felt all day. When she returned home, the yard was full of confused faces. Leo stared at the empty tables. Mom, where's the food? Ava met his eyes calmly. I gave it to people who would appreciate it. The silence that followed was louder than any laughter. Leo's face flushed with embarrassment as he pulled his mother aside. I was just joking, he said, his voice lower now, less confident. I didn't mean anything by it. Ava looked at him for a long moment before replying. Sometimes, Leo, what you mean and what you make someone feel are not the same. Daniel joined them, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder. Your mother worked all night. You should have seen her. Leo's eyes dropped. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't think. Ava sighed, the tension slowly leaving her shoulders. I know. That's why we're talking now. The party continued with store-bought food, but something else had changed. Later that evening, Leo helped clear the plates without being asked, and Daniel brewed tea for Ava as she rested on the couch. It wasn't a grand apology or a dramatic moment, but it was real. As Ava sipped her tea, she thought about how love didn't need to be loud to be strong, but it did need to be seen. She smiled gently, hopeful that this small shift would grow into something lasting, something that would teach them all to treat care and sacrifice not as jokes, but as gifts. Ava woke the next morning to a quiet house, the kind of silence that felt different from the night before. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and painted soft lines across the floor. She lay still for a moment, listening, half expecting to hear the clatter of dishes or Leo's music blasting from his room. Instead, she heard footsteps in the kitchen. When she walked in, Leo was standing by the sink, washing cups with slow, careful movements. He looked up, startled. Good morning, Mom, he said, his voice gentle. Ava nodded. Good morning, Leo. There was an awkward pause between them, filled with all the things they didn't say the night before. Finally, Leo cleared his throat. I told my friends about what you did at the shelter, he admitted. They said it was really kind. Ava felt a small smile tug at her lips. Kindness is easy when you remember other people are carrying things too, she replied. Daniel appeared with a tray of toast and tea, placing a cup in front of Ava like an offering. Breakfast in bed didn't work, so breakfast at the table will have to do, he joked. Ava laughed softly, and for the first time in days, the sound felt light instead of heavy. Later that afternoon, Ava decided to visit the shelter again, this time without trays of food, just with her hands and her time. Leo surprised her by grabbing his jacket. I'll come with you, he said, almost shyly. On the drive, the radio hummed quietly in the background, filling the space between them. Ava glanced at him. You don't have to do this for me, she said. Leo shook his head. I'm not. I want to understand. At the shelter, they were greeted by the same worker, who smiled warmly. Back so soon, he asked. Ava nodded, and Leo stepped forward. I wanted to help, he said. The worker handed him a box of bread to carry inside. As they moved among the people, Leo listened to stories, handed out cups of soup, and even laughed with a little boy who spilled water all over his shoes. Ava watched quietly, her heart swelling. She didn't say anything, but she felt like something important was shifting, not just in Leo, but in the space between them. That evening, back at home, Daniel sat on the porch with Ava, the sky above them painted in soft shades of orange and purple. You know, he said thoughtfully, I never really noticed how much you carry for this family. I just assumed you were strong enough to hold it all. Ava looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. I am strong, she replied, but strength doesn't mean I don't get tired. Daniel nodded slowly. I want to do better, he said. Inside, Leo was on the phone, telling one of his friends about the shelter and the people he met. Ava caught a few words through the open window. It makes you think differently. She leaned back in her chair, letting the cool air wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt like the work she did, the care she gave, was beginning to echo back to her instead of disappearing into silence. Over the next few days, small changes filled the house. Leo started asking before inviting friends over, and Daniel began cooking dinner twice a week, though his meals were simple and sometimes burned. Ava teased him gently, and he laughed at himself. One night, as they sat around the table eating spaghetti that was slightly overcooked, Leo raised his glass of water. To Mom, he said. for teaching us that love isn't something you joke about. Ava blinked back tears as Daniel clinked his glass against Leo's. To Ava, he added. The moment wasn't grand or dramatic, but it felt solid, like a stone placed carefully in the foundation of their family. Ava realized that respect didn't arrive all at once. It grew in small, steady ways through conversations, shared meals, and the willingness to listen when it would be easier not to. One afternoon, Ava received a call from the shelter. The worker's voice was cheerful. We're hosting a community dinner this weekend, he said. Would you like to come? Maybe even share a recipe or two? Ava hesitated, her old instinct to give rising up. Then she remembered her promise to herself to rest and set boundaries. I can come, she said slowly, but I won't be cooking all night. The worker laughed kindly. Fair enough. We'll cook together. When Ava told her family, Leo grinned. I'll help, he said quickly. Daniel nodded. Me too. Ava smiled, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. This time, she wouldn't be carrying everything alone. This time, they would stand beside her, not behind her. The day of the community dinner arrived with bright skies and a soft breeze. Ava stood in the shelter's kitchen, tying her apron, surrounded by volunteers chopping vegetables and stirring pots. Leo worked beside her, carefully slicing carrots, while Daniel wrestled with a stubborn lid on a pot of soup. Laughter filled the room as someone joked about his struggle. Ava felt a lightness she hadn't known before, a joy that came from sharing the work instead of shouldering it. A young woman approached her and said, I heard about what you did with the birthday food. It inspired a lot of us. Ava felt her cheeks warm. I just did what felt right, she replied. The woman smiled. Sometimes that's exactly what people need to see. As the evening unfolded, tables filled with families, strangers, and stories. Ava moved from one group to another, asking names, listening to laughter, and offering seconds to anyone who wanted more. Leo carried trays, his face glowing with a sense of purpose. Daniel poured drinks and chatted with an older man who told him stories about his childhood. Ava paused for a moment to take it all in. This, she realized, was what community felt like, not just giving but connecting, not just serving but being seen. She caught Leo's eye across the room, and he gave her a small nod, a silent thank you that spoke louder than any joke ever had. Later that night, back at home, the three of them sat in the living room, tired but content. Leo broke the comfortable silence. Mom, he said, I used to think all the stuff you did was just normal, like it would always be there no matter what. Ava looked at him carefully. Some things are only there because someone chooses to keep them there, she said. Daniel nodded. And sometimes we forget to notice the choosing. Leo leaned back on the couch, thoughtful. I don't want to forget anymore. Ava reached over and squeezed his hand. The simple gesture felt like a promise, not just between them, but for the way they would treat each other moving forward. In the weeks that followed, Ava found herself saying no more often, and to her surprise, the world didn't fall apart. When Leo asked her to cook for a last-minute gathering, she replied, Not tonight, but I can help you plan for another day. Instead of being annoyed, he nodded. Okay, we'll figure it out. Daniel took over grocery shopping, sometimes calling from the store to ask where things were. Ava laughed each time, realizing that sharing responsibility also meant sharing small moments of connection. The house felt different now, not quieter or louder, but balanced, like a song where every voice had a place. One evening, Ava found an old photo album tucked away in a drawer. She flipped through pictures of her younger self, her mother standing beside her in a kitchen that looked a lot like her own. Leo peeked over her shoulder. Is that Grandma? He asked. Ava nodded. She taught me how to cook, she said. And how to keep going even when no one noticed. Leo studied the picture. I wish I had met her, he said. Ava smiled sadly. You're meeting her now in a way, she replied. Every time you choose to care. The seasons changed, and with them, small traditions began to form. Sunday dinners became a shared effort, with Leo trying new recipes and Daniel perfecting his soup. Ava took on a quieter role, guiding instead of leading. One night, as they sat down to eat, Leo looked around the table and said, This feels different from before. Ava tilted her head. How? She asked. Leo shrugged. Like we're all part of it, not just guests. Daniel raised his spoon in agreement. I like that, he said. Ava felt a deep sense of peace settle in her chest, the kind that came not from doing everything, but from knowing she didn't have to. At the shelter, Ava became a familiar face, though she no longer felt the need to prove herself through endless giving. She listened more, spoke less, and learned that sometimes the greatest gift was simply showing up. One afternoon, the elderly woman who had thanked her that first day found her again. You came back, the woman said, smiling. Ava nodded. So did you, she replied. They sat together for a while, watching people pass by, sharing quiet stories. Ava realized that respect wasn't something you demanded. It grew naturally when you allowed yourself to be seen as a person, not just a helper. Leo's birthday came around again the next year, but this time, there was no all-night cooking, no heavy expectations. They ordered some food, cooked a few simple dishes together, and laughed when things went wrong. Leo raised a toast. To Mom, he said again, but this time his voice was steady and sincere. For showing me what real care looks like. Ava smiled, feeling the words settle gently instead of cutting deep. Daniel added, and to us for learning. The moment felt full, not perfect, but honest. That night, as Ava cleaned up the kitchen, Leo joined her, drying dishes and placing them carefully in the cupboard. You know, he said, I don't think I ever told you this, but I'm proud of you. Ava paused, the dish in her hands forgotten for a moment. Thank you, she said quietly. The house hummed with a soft, peaceful energy, the kind that came from understanding rather than effort. Ava realized that the journey they had taken wasn't about one joke or one meal. It was about learning how to see each other, really see each other in the ordinary moments that made up their lives. As the lights went out and the house settled into sleep, Ava sat by the window, watching the moon rise above the rooftops. She thought about the woman she used to be, carrying everything without question, and the woman she was becoming, one who allowed space for rest, for conversation, for shared care. Somewhere down the hall, she heard Leo laughing softly at something on his phone and Daniel humming in the bedroom. The sounds felt like anchors, steady and warm. Ava whispered to the quiet room, "This is enough." And in that simple sentence, she found a kind of peace she had been searching for all along. Ava's days began to take on a softer rhythm, one that felt less like a race and more like a steady walk. On a quiet morning, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, watching the steam rise and disappear into the sunlight. Leo rushed in late for work, tying his shoes in a hurry. "Mom, have you seen my jacket?" he asked. Ava pointed calmly toward the chair. "Right where you left it," she said with a small smile. He paused, picked it up, and then stopped. "I'm glad you're here," he added suddenly. The words surprised them both. Ava felt them settle in her chest like a warm stone. "I'm glad you are too," she replied. Daniel passed through the room, brushing Ava's shoulder gently as he headed out the door. "Dinner's on me tonight," he called. Ava laughed softly, shaking her head at how much had changed in such simple ways. At the shelter, Ava was asked to help lead a small group of volunteers. She hesitated at first, unsure if she wanted another role that felt like responsibility, but she agreed on one condition. "We do this together," she told them. The group nodded, and soon the kitchen was filled with shared laughter and teamwork. Leo joined when he could, sometimes bringing friends who were curious about the place he talked about so often. Ava noticed how proudly he introduced her now. "This is my mom, Ava," he would say. "She's the reason I come here." Each time, Ava felt a gentle swell of emotion, not from being praised, but from being acknowledged as a person, not just a role. One evening, Ava received a message from an old neighbor who had heard about the shelter dinners. "You always had a way of bringing people together," the message read. Ava stared at the screen for a long moment, thinking about how invisible she had once felt, how small her efforts had seemed. She typed back, "I'm still learning how to let people see me." When she shared the message with Leo, he smiled. "I see you," he said simply. Ava reached over and hugged him, the gesture filled with a quiet understanding that didn't need more words. A family gathering brought relatives from near and far, filling the house with familiar voices and old stories. As they sat around the table, someone asked Ava how she managed to do so much. Ava looked around at Daniel, at Leo, at the people who now leaned in to listen instead of talk over her. "I don't do it alone anymore," she said. Leo raised his glass in agreement, and Daniel squeezed her hand. The room hummed with warmth and laughter, and Ava felt a deep sense of belonging that had been missing for longer than she realized. Late that night, after the house had quieted and everyone had gone to bed, Ava stood once more in her kitchen, the same place where the story had begun. The counters were clean, the lights dim, and the clock ticked softly on the wall. She rested her hands on the counter and breathed in the stillness. This time, she wasn't alone in her thoughts or her work. She felt surrounded by the echoes of voices, of shared meals, of moments where love had been seen instead of overlooked. Ava whispered, "Thank you," not to anyone in particular, but to the journey itself. Then she turned off the light and walked away, carrying with her a sense of peace that felt earned, steady, and real.